Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into something kind of fascinating? We're always searching for that thing that makes us want to jump out of bed, right? And you've been particularly curious about Ikigai.
It's a really intriguing concept.
Well, get this podcast we're diving into, it's not just some fleeting self-help trend. It's deeply rooted in Japanese culture, specifically Okinawa. You know, that place where people seem to live forever.
Oh yeah, Okinawa. They've got one of the highest percentages of centenarians in the world. It's incredible.
That makes you wonder what their secret is, right?
Like, what are they putting in their tea?
Seriously. But on a serious note, the podcast talks about Ikigai being about more than just living a long life. It's about waking up excited, feeling like your life has meaning, a purpose.
Absolutely. And that's where these 4 pillars they talk about come in. They're like guideposts pointing you toward that life you're craving.
And the first 2, they really resonated with me. It's all about combining what you love, what you're passionate about, with what you're naturally good at. Like finding that sweet spot where your passion and your profession collide.
I love that. Finding that sweet spot.
It's like when I get lost in organizing my spice rack alphabetically.
You're kidding, right?
I wish I was. But that's the thing about passions. You get totally immersed. The podcast actually connected this to the idea of flow states, which I thought was fascinating. Apparently the whole thing in psychology.
It is. When you're in a flow state, you're totally absorbed in what you're doing. Time flies by, you're super focused, and the research shows people are not only happier in flow, they produce their most creative work that way too.
Makes you think, what if we could tap into that flow state more often, even in our everyday lives?
Exactly. And the podcast suggests that finding those moments, those in-the-zone experiences, and seeing how they connect to things you're naturally skilled at, it can be a big clue on your Ikigai journey.
It's like, what if my spice organizing craziness is actually a sign of a deeper talent?
Maybe. It's about looking at those things you do effortlessly, even if they seem small or silly, and recognizing the skills behind them.
And then the other 2 pillars come in. The podcast talks about considering what the world needs and how you can actually make a living from it. It's like that ancient Greek concept of arete, using your strengths for something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. It's not just about you and your passions, it's about how those passions intersect with the world's needs, how you can use them to make a difference.
It's where the real magic happens, right? Where your passions and the world's needs align.
Absolutely.
So it's like this amazing recipe, taking your passions, mixing in your skills, and then seeing how it all connects to something larger than yourself. But how do we actually begin that process? Where do we even start? It feels kind of daunting.
It is a big question, but the podcast had actually offered some really practical advice, which I appreciated.
Oh, good, because I'm all about action steps. So tell me, what's the first one?
Well, it might sound kind of obvious, but it starts with looking inward. It's about really getting to know yourself. Your values, your passions, your skills, all of it.
Oh, right. Like that saying, self-awareness is the first step to self-improvement.
Exactly. It's about tuning into your own inner compass. The podcast suggested thinking back to those moments when you felt truly alive, engaged, those times you were totally in your element. What was it about those experiences that made you feel that way?
I like that. Looking for those moments that light you up.
Yeah.
It's not about trying to find this one big calling, right? It's more about recognizing those moments of genuine joy and engagement. But how do you go from those little sparks to figuring out what you should actually do? How do you translate that into action?
That's where the whole skill building part comes in. It's about identifying what you're naturally good at, those things that seem almost effortless for you.
Which, let's be honest, can be hard. It's easy to downplay our skills.
So true. But they had this great point. Think about the things people come to you for help with. What problems do you actually enjoy solving?
Oh, interesting. So like I'm always the one my friends come to for help organizing their closets. Maybe that's a sign.
Maybe. Those are often the areas where our natural talents really shine through. And when you can align those skills with something you're passionate about and something the world needs, well, that's where the magic really starts to happen.
Okay, now I'm getting chills. But it's one thing to identify your passions and skills, and a whole other thing to actually put yourself out there. Do they offer any guidance on that?
They do. They encourage experimentation. Trying new things, stepping outside your comfort zone. It's about viewing this whole process as a journey, not a destination.
Oh, I like that. It takes the pressure off, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't need to have it all figured out right away. Did they have any specific suggestions for how to experiment?
They talked about trying out different activities, hobbies, maybe even volunteering. Pay attention to what energizes you, what feels like a chore, and what resonates with you on a deeper level. It's all about gathering information, adjusting your path along the way.
So it's okay to feel your way through it, to change your mind if something isn't working.
Absolutely. Your Ikigai isn't static. It's going to change and evolve with you. What brought you joy at 20 might be totally different at 40. That's okay.
That's such a relief to hear. It's not about getting it right the first time, it's about being open to the journey. But what about the practicality of it all? Finding a way to make a living doing something you love. Is that even possible for most people?
It's a great question, and that's where the vocation piece of the Ikigai puzzle comes in. But it's not just about earning a paycheck. It's about finding a way to support yourself while also pursuing your passions and contributing to the world.
Right, like that sweet spot where it all comes together, where your passions and your skills and the world's needs align in a way that feels sustainable. Is that really possible?
That's what they argue. It's not always easy, of course. But they made an interesting point. Finding your Ikigai isn't always about making huge life changes. It's also about noticing and appreciating the joy in those everyday moments.
Oh, absolutely. It's about savoring a good cup of coffee, a walk in nature, a heart-to-heart with a good friend. Those seemingly small things make a big difference.
Exactly. Sometimes those small joys can lead us to bigger discoveries about what truly makes our lives meaningful.
So we've covered a lot of ground, from identifying our passions and skills to recognizing those flow state moments and even considering how our unique talents can contribute to the world around us. But I think the million-dollar question is, how do we actually weave all of this together into a life that feels meaningful and fulfilling? How do we actually live our Ikigai?
It's a great question, and the podcast made it clear that discovering your Ikigai isn't like checking off items on a to-do list. It's not a destination you arrive at and say, okay, I'm done. It's more of an ongoing process, a way of approaching life.
Okay, so it's a journey, not a destination. I like that. But journeys need a good compass, right? What do they say about navigating the ups and downs of life while staying connected to your Ikigai?
They highlighted a few key points that I thought were really insightful. First and foremost, they stress the importance of mindfulness. And I don't just mean meditation, although that can certainly be a part of it. They were talking about cultivating a sense of presence in those simple, everyday moments. Remember all those little joys we talked about earlier?
Like that perfect cup of coffee or a walk in nature or a real genuine conversation with someone you care about.
Exactly. It's about slowing down enough to really savor those experiences, to appreciate the beauty in the ordinary instead of just rushing through life on autopilot.
It's so easy to get caught up in the hustle and bustle, to focus on the next thing on the to-do list, that we forget to appreciate those little moments that make life worth living.
Exactly. And when you approach those everyday moments with intention and awareness, it can make a world of difference. You start to notice the good things, the things that bring you joy, and those little sparks can reignite your sense of purpose, even on the toughest days.
That's such a good reminder. But life isn't always sunshine and roses, right? We change, we grow, our circumstances shift. How do we stay true to our Ikigai when life throws those inevitable curveballs our way?
That's where their second point comes in, evolution. They talked about how important it is to remember that your Ikigai isn't static, it's not set in stone. It can, and probably will, evolve with you over time.
So what felt like my calling at 20 might look completely different at 40, and that's okay.
Exactly. It's a sign of growth, of a life well lived. As we gain new experiences, develop new skills, our passions and priorities might shift, and our Ikigai naturally evolves along with us.
That's really reassuring to hear, actually. It takes the pressure off having to figure it all out right now. But I imagine it can still feel daunting at times. Did they have any advice for those moments when we might feel lost or discouraged on this journey of finding and living our Ikigai?
They did. And it's a message that bears repeating. Embrace imperfection. Finding and living your Ikigai isn't about achieving some perfect state of bliss or having it all figured out. It's about aligning your actions with your values, even if it's messy and imperfect.
It's about progress, not perfection, right? It's about showing up each day and making choices that feel aligned with who you are and what you value, even if you stumble along the way.
Precisely. And remembering that comparison is the thief of joy. Your journey is uniquely yours. What brings you joy and a sense of purpose might look different from someone else's, and that's perfectly okay.
The beauty of Ikigai is that it's not one size fits all. It's about embracing your own path, celebrating your progress, and trusting that you're exactly where you need to be.
You know, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm reminded of something you said earlier about how finding your Ikigai isn't just about those big, life-altering moments. It's about those seemingly small, everyday things that light us up.
Absolutely. It's about savoring those simple pleasures, noticing the beauty in the ordinary, and finding those little sparks of joy in the everyday. Because ultimately, those little sparks can add up to a life that feels rich, meaningful, and truly aligned with who we are. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of Ikigai, everyone. We hope you found it as inspiring as we did. Until next time, keep exploring, keep discovering, and keep seeking those things that spark your own unique Ikigai.